So welcome to today's lesson, and I'll just give you a few moments to have a look at the image and think about what maybe you can infer from this source. So just a bit of thinking time for now. No title yet, just having a look and seeing what you can determine from it. Okay, so hopefully, having seen lots of images like this already in the course so far, it's a sort of typical immigrant family. The circumstances, the living conditions that they were having to deal with. You can see it's very tightly compact, lots of things crammed into a small space, and many of them living in one room in effect. And as it says, they were often damp, dirty, and overcrowded. So I suppose a couple of questions just to get you thinking, really. How far does this reflect all immigrants' experiences? And the bigger question that we need to sort of engage with today is the impact immigration had on America. A little bit of recap along the way, because I know we've touched upon migration to America in the late 19th, early 20th century already. So this is a really famous image, a fantastic one. And again, just a bit of thinking time, because there's a caption that's linked to this, and what do you think the message is here? So I'll just give you a moment to sort of come up with your own interpretation. Okay, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time, and I suppose what I want you to be aware of is that immigration had been a contentious issue for some time. We're obviously looking at post-World War One and the 1920s. But here you have a cartoon from 1891, and the judge is saying that these immigrants are bringing these problems to America. They're causing the anarchy, they're causing socialism and other evils. Okay, so we need to restrict their access if we're to create a stable and crime-free state. Okay, so that's been an ongoing issue for some time. So the title today really is about, is America a land of opportunity? But in effect, we're looking at the impact of immigration on American society. Sort of four core aims. I think we've already got some understanding of the fact that America is ethnically diverse, but I just want to revisit that and get you to really embed those key groups in your mind. Again, a bit of a recap, but to understand the government approach to immigration and how that changes over time and maybe why it changes. The sort of two key questions really where you're going to make a judgment is, what was the impact of immigration on American society? And lastly, to start to think about their experiences. What, if we're to start to make a summary of this or to make a judgment, actually overall, what was the experience of immigrants in America? I suppose the starting point for me is always, most immigrants, don't forget, as they were coming to the East Coast and to Ellis Island, would have seen the Statue of Liberty. And I just want to remind you of the message that it offers, this sort of landmark that people see on the horizon after possibly a very horrendous journey. It wasn't as simple as that. Making it to America, there were many more challenges in their lives that they faced on land as well as on sea. Okay, so just really quickly, I'm not going to dwell on this for too long. We sort of did this in a previous lesson way back earlier in the year, but just a reminder that people were arriving in America or going to America for a number of reasons. But number one, there were the pull factors. Okay, America offered lots of opportunity on a number of levels: economic opportunity, more space to living, lots of natural resources. So very much an attractive proposition for immigrants. But there are also the push factors. So in their where they were previously living, they may have lived in overcrowded areas, in poor housing. There may have been no opportunities to own land and to create their own business, for example, and prosper economically. So just understanding that why people came to America, and there was this massive influx, wasn't there, of over 40 million people from around 1850 to 1910. Again, just a real quick recap. America, even in the period we're studying, sort of by 1920, consists of a huge number of nationalities. With the many, one, this idea of them all coming together in this melting pot. America was about bringing lots of these immigrants together. Don't forget the very foundations of America was born from immigration. But obviously what you've got to be aware of here from the off is the clash between immigrants. So you've got the old immigrants, the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that were maybe there and already settled and established. And then you've got this new influx in the late 19th, early 20th century of Eastern Europeans, Southern Europeans, Japanese, Chinese, and inevitably this led to cultural clashes. Okay, and what you've got in essence is the start of a hierarchy and a class-based system in America, even though it's meant to be, with the many, the idea of one nation, one state, one group. So a couple of just questions for you to think about. Hopefully you know a little bit about how immigration developed in that late 19th century period. And again, just starting to understand the dynamics of the melting pot and the potential difficulties this created. And don't forget, what you then had was segregation as a result of this. So you have sort of in New York, for example, there's an area known as Little Italy. In Detroit, there's a place called Greektown. So they became very much isolated to their own communities rather than actually becoming one joint nation together. Again, I'm just going to give you a few moments just to have a look at these images. We've covered this already, but just to remind yourself of the different ethnic groups that were arriving and how, again, they come together under the same umbrella of Americans, but they very much had their own identity, their own way of doing things, their own culture, their own religion. So just have a little look, see if you can identify them. I'm just going to bring them all up really quickly for you guys to think about. You should be in a position to sort of identify all 6 groups and to be able to write a few contextual pieces of information. And again, I stress the importance of going back and revisiting the earlier video if you're unable to do so. Okay, so probably again a good opportunity to recap on the American presidents, really. And I'm just going to bring them all up. Apologies for them sort of drip feeding in, but cast your eyes across those 4 presidents. Can you remember them? I'm just going to give you a moment again to think about that for me. So on the left-hand side, hopefully you can identify Woodrow Wilson, the Democratic president that led America through the war, and also promoted that idea of working alongside the League of Nations and other countries. Was obviously then taken over by the Republicans in 1921 with Warren Harding, and he was followed in 1923 by Calvin Coolidge, the third image, and finally in 1929 Herbert Hoover. So very much a Republican-dominated 1920s. But what's interesting, I suppose, just looking at immigration, is don't forget, even in 1917, so at the time of the war and the decision to join the war effort, a law banned entry to the USA for any immigrant over the age of 16 who was unable to read a sentence of 40 words. Many immigrants, don't forget, especially those from Eastern Europe, had no education, so this was an impossible task, and therefore they were refused entry. So this started under the Democrats. It was very much a common thread, and lots of people agreed with the fact they needed to cut the numbers coming in. Now, the Republicans really intensify this. So in 1921, you've got an immigration quota law, and in effect, this would only allow 350,000 immigrants to enter America each year. Okay, it was set at 3%. In effect, a proportion of the number of people of the same nationality who had been in America in 1910 were allowed in. Again, to sort of reduce the numbers even further, you've got the Immigration Act or the National Origins Act in 1924, and this cut the number of immigrants coming in per year to 150,000. So America was evidently cutting its numbers, and this is a fantastic cartoon from 1924 showing the sort of huge influx of people trying to get in, and this funnel very much allowing specific people to come through the gate with the sort of quote attached to it, the only way to handle it. So figures were very much kept to a minimum. Now, by 1929, you're down to a maximum of 150,000 immigrants per year. What's really evident in all of this is that no Asians at all were coming in by the late 1920s. And they were giving priority as part of this quota to Northern and Western Europeans. So 85% of those 150,000 were from Northern and Western Europe only. And finally, that sort of group that we know were coming in the late 19th, early 20th century, the Southern Eastern Europeans, the Japanese, the Chinese, they were cut to an absolute minimum. As I say, there were no Asians by the late 1920s coming in. So what was the impact of immigration? I mean, firstly, we know it's a land of opportunity. People were going there for jobs, for economic prosperity, for religious freedom. It provided that certainly for some immigrants. Secondly, we even benefit from that in our society, don't we? Cultural diversity, lots of different groups coming together, sharing their cultural heritage and being able to, allow people to access things that they maybe never, different food types, different religions, different, ways of doing things, different clothing. It's definitely going to make for a more positive life experience by sharing in those different cultures and coming together. Don't forget, the US had grown and grown economically and were the most powerful state in World War I in the world, or country, sorry, and that was very much as a result of immigration. And lastly, it provided huge business opportunities, trading both internally and externally. So massive financial gains here from immigration. Well, the negative aspect were lots of immigrants were coming in with limited skill sets. So they were coming in, they were unskilled, uneducated, therefore opportunities were kept to a minimum. They ended up doing lots of poorly paid jobs, poorly or lowly sort of respected jobs as well, I suppose, in that respect. There was obviously going to be a language barrier. When you're talking about, there's a word called assimilation, trying to bring people together. There was a bit of a breakdown in language that caused conflict. And again, if you're trying to identify as one nation, there's a sort of a bit of a clash there with language issues. You had very much the early 20th century a domination of Protestantism and Christianity. Well, you had new religious sects coming in which challenged the normal way of doing things, and that created a bit of upheaval for the traditionalists in America. World War I was definitely created a problem in some respects. It made America realize they need to focus maybe on themselves rather than others. It also led to them being a bit fearful of the likes of Russia. Think about the revolution in Russia, the upheaval of the people there. Would that potentially happen in America? Could the Russians sort of manage to find their way there? And we'll come on to that in a future lesson. We've already mentioned that they were limited in the opportunities they could take up because of a lack of education and so on. But because they would do jobs for a low wage, they would pretty much do anything, immigrants, there was far more prejudice because there was a feeling that they were stealing jobs from true Americans, the Americans that had been there for a longer period of time. And finally, we know about the legislation from 1917 to 1924 and how devastating that was. So those immigrants that actually were in America were sort of had this, were tarnished, I suppose, in some ways, because they clearly didn't want them there. And there was a very negative approach from the government towards immigration. Therefore, that reflected on people that had recently migrated. So just last couple of things from me. Please do have a read of these sources in your own time. Pause the videos. This is very much one perspective, but I suppose we're sort of questioning how far does it reflect others. And then if I flick forward here, we've got another, a Greek-born restaurant owner who came to America and was highly successful. So you've got these real sort of contrasting images. And just, again, one final time, we should really have covered all four of these now. You should be able to certainly write about each one. All right, thanks for your efforts today. Have a great day, guys. See you soon. Bye bye.